Looking for your participation. Al, in the afternoon's got Representative Jeremy Munson on the program. You want to join in? Al at KTOE.com. Send an email there. You can always call 497-2777. Representative Munson, thank you very much for being on the program.
Well, thanks for having me on again, Al.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure. You know what you're talking about. I want to talk about this gun control thing because when you grow up out outstate, you learn about guns very early in life. They're not a big, scary, spooky thing. You go hunting. First couple of years, you don't get to go hunting. You don't even get to bring a gun. If you're trained right. Remember getting, if you're carrying your gun around as a young kid, and if you didn't know where the barrel end was, somebody's going to smuck you in the back of the head real quick and say, hey, gun safety was always just a thing out here for me. So I was always one, and I joined the service at 18, got trained by the Army. I thoroughly believe if you've been trained, you should have a right to carry a gun. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. And now the news is just one kid after the next shooting one other kid on trampolines and driving down the road. They're all young bucks doing this stuff. It's driving me crazy. I mean, it's anecdotal, but it seems like it. And now they got this lawsuit wanting to get 18 to 20-year-olds the right to carry. Tell us about the law itself or the lawsuit, and where do you stand on it? I'm really mixed on it, and I shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's tough to you can find arguments for and against this lawsuit. From my personal story, I mean, I went to college a year early, and so I moved down to Minneapolis when I was 17. I got a job managing an apartment building, so I was showing vacant units to people, strangers, really. Yeah. And I was also a real estate agent. I got a real estate license when I turned 18. I bought a house all before I graduated high school. So I was living on my own, away from my parents, and in charge of my own safety. And yet, and under today's law, I would not be able to carry a gun for self-defense. And that's what this lawsuit is about. It's about people they're adults. They have adult jobs. They're doing adult things. Some of them in the lawsuit have served our country in the armed forces. So they went and fought in a war, and they come back here and they're 20 years old and they still can't carry a gun under Minnesota law, which only allows people at 21 to carry a gun.
Which is so crazy to me. An actual true story. A guy who's in my unit with me, reserves. He was 18, 19 years old, went through the Army and yada, yada. He carried a firearm with him because he delivered pizzas in Minneapolis. And you're just walking into people's places. They knew you had change for a pizza and that sort of thing. Literally, a guy tried to rob him and he shot a guy. They had an armed confrontation. And if he wasn't armed, he would have been dead. He ended up actually shooting the guy because he was well trained. But my point being is, how do you ask some young man or woman to go to Fort Sill, train for 90 days, head on off to Afghanistan, shoot howitzers, cannons, and the rest, but come back here? Well, yeah, you can't do that anymore, but sorry, you can't take care of yourself. That's why I'm torn between this. I think 18-year-olds should. I think if you're going to ask them to war, they should be able to drink. I think they should be able to smoke a cigarette if they want it. I guess as I'm talking with you, it's coming out. No, we can't have it. If either you're old enough to, or you're not.
Right. And, the arguments that, keep in mind, Republicans and Democrats, except for a few of us, voted to increase the tobacco age to 21 last year in the Minnesota legislature. And the argument was because people's brains haven't finished developing, and so they're not mature enough to make that decision until they're 21. Yet in the same legislative session, Democrats proposed lowering the voting age to 16, right? So, you got to figure out at what point you're an adult and just make that for everything, for signing contracts, exactly. and everything. Yeah.
And that's where I'm at. And then if you're going to make it 21, that's when people's brains are developed. And that's when they can start making real grown-up decisions. Then I'm sorry, the Army and the Air Force, Navy, and Marines, you're going to have to start going after 21-year-old kids to join, because we shouldn't be using our youth then that way. If they're not smart enough to do those other things, they surely shouldn't be smart enough to put their life on the line to go to another country and fight for something they may or may not even believe in.
Yeah. Now, earlier today, I spent some time with a Star Tribune reporter who's doing a story on the violence in Minneapolis and how they can, work to reduce it through legislation. And, he asked me about straw purchases. In other words, somebody going in to buy a gun for the purpose of selling it to someone else, and or giving it to someone who is prohibited, right? Yeah. You're basically buying it for somebody else. And that is illegal. You can gift to someone who's not prohibited, but you can't sell it to somebody who's prohibited or transfer it to them.
Sure.
And they're trying to figure, there's a woman in Minneapolis who's basically homeless, who went and bought 45 handguns and sold them for $100 over retail to people on the street, and they're trying to prosecute her. They're following, some other stories. Straw purchases are illegal, but they're very difficult to prosecute. Less than 1% of the felons that are caught with guns illegally do they go and actually prosecute the person that sold them or transferred the gun to them. And it's difficult. If we did something legislatively to try to enforce it with retailers, you're going to end up with a situation where retailers will then be racially profiling or psychologically profiling people. And that's very difficult. We see it all the time where a husband and wife go in and the husband will be, talking about what gun, because they're trying to find a gun for their, spouse. And, the spouse ends up filling out the paperwork. Well, is the man prohibited? Is that why she's buying it? We don't know. But in certain instances, the retailer will start profiling and denying the gun sale just because they feel strange about the situation. And that's not a good thing either.
Well, you say this is a lawsuit. This lawsuit is going through the Minnesota Court of Appeals. Is that where we're at? Or is that what's at the Supreme Court?
I think it's just starting in the county level. So it's going to be a state lawsuit, and there's several people on the lawsuit that are suing their county sheriff who denied them the right to have a carry permit. But as we talk about violence in general and look for reasons or ways that we can reduce violence, I think we have to start with enforcing the laws that are already in the books to get guns out of the hands of bad people. But we also have to recognize there are 18 to 20-year-olds that are actually went out and served our country or are safe around guns. And we should not be denying them the right to protect themselves when there's 15-year-olds running around with handguns shooting people.
Well, yeah, and you look at the National Guard. We've used and abused the National Guard just to protect the state capitol and that sort of thing. These are 18-year-old cooks, according to the governor. But they're out there. They've been trained with weapons, but they can't protect themselves when they go home. Let's throw this at you as well before we go to the first break. What in HE22 picks is going on in Minneapolis? They had the George Floyd Memorial or the park there in the middle of the road, the autonomous zone. That's what I'm looking. They had an autonomous zone. Just for the record, George Floyd, anybody else, I'm against autonomous zones inside our country. I think they're crazy. But they've had it. They've been allowed to have it. We get past the trial. We get past the year anniversary. The mayor comes out and says, okay, we're going to take it down. They take it down in the morning. It's back up in the afternoon.
Yeah. And they've done it twice. They went and took it down again and it was back up. And, keep in mind, this is led by a city council man in that area that was basically saying, look, the businesses are going to go under because there's no customers coming here. We have to allow people through to come and do business here, to shop. And we need to reopen. It's time. But
you talked about we've got to follow our laws. You got to, at least with the guns, we have to start at least enforcing the laws we've already got on the books. There's got to be a law that you can't put up buildings in the middle of a street. And for no other reason, like I'm under the impression like 80% of the businesses on that area are all minority owned.
Yeah.
You're hurting yourself. We got to clean the street out. And you want to put it in the park next. I don't care if they have a monument. That's not my point. It just can't be in the middle of the dang street. But they're letting it happen is my point. We're not stopping them. They're carrying in large blocks of things. How long does it take a cop to stand in the middle of the street for a little while and make sure they don't do it? I'm missing something, and I think it's the want to stop it.
Yeah, and I would say to the people in the autonomous zone that are trying to, that you're there for the movement, you won. Chauvin's been convicted. If you want to change the policing laws, why don't you come over to the Capitol and set up shop on the Capitol grounds and protest? Because we're going to start a special session on Monday, and people want to hear from you.
See that to me, that makes more sense. It's maybe easier because they're in Minneapolis, don't have to take a bus to get to the Capitol. Take the bus, set up the thing there on the front lawn, and then have your conversation. But at least you're talking to the people that can make a difference. The poor guy who owns a shop a block from there can't make a dime because we're finally opened up, but no one get to his business. It's nuts to me. And I got to be honest, I doubt they'll ever have a Republican mayor in Minneapolis, but they've got to have a different one. They've got to have somebody who at least says, I'm going to work for the people I work for. Am I nuts?
No, you're not nuts. And I would argue that there is a chance that we could have a Republican mayor in Minneapolis if somebody just starts talking about civil liberties and individual rights and getting government out of their business. I think people would actually appreciate that, but we'll see.
Interesting. We'll find out. Representative Munson, when we come back, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about what is or is not going on at the state capitol. Lots has to be done by Monday, and we're hearing squeaks out of what's going on up there. We'll talk after this with Representative Jeremy Munson on Al in the afternoon. Maybe I'm just getting old and cantankerous, Representative Munson, but seen this show too many times. So we are supposed to get everything all squared away come Monday. So we're just days away. We're hearing nothing. There's nothing happening as far as I can tell. And that really scares me in that I just don't believe you can get it done by Monday. We would have had news stories leaked. The Republicans would have come out and said, we got this. And the we're hearing nothing. So it leads me to believe there's nothing getting done. Am I wrong?
There are conversations happening. I don't know if you remember in sixth grade when you used to fold up the little notes into the football and kick it back and forth.
Yes.
I think that's happening in St. Paul right now. But other than that, other than passing notes back and forth, there's no serious agreements to anything. It's kind of a standstill.
You got to get your people on that. We need to make that little triangle football and have it going like this. And that is a great representation. You are absolutely correct. But what bothers me about this, Representative Munson, is that there is no input from any of the rest of us. What I get is when I talk to folks, talk to a lot of you folks, is that if it was just the numbers game, getting the money down, we'd probably get this stuff done. But there are policy issues that are going to throw this whole thing out the door because both sides are saying, well, we get to this point. If it doesn't, you don't give me this, we're not signing anything. And I think we're going to go crashing into a shutdown. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. The policy is the big holdup, and this is not the policy year. This next year is supposed to be when we decide on policy. This is the budget year. But of course, when you're deciding budgets, it's budgets for certain programs that people don't want to shift money to. The other strange thing this year is that the governor still wanted tax increases, even though we have this enormous surplus, and the federal government is just raining billions of dollars down on our state and local governments, and everybody's just flush with cash. So it shouldn't be an issue for raising taxes. There's so much money. In fact, there's a huge, billions and billions of dollars extra that hasn't even been appropriated yet. And that's the fear, is that if we go into, if we end the legislative special session and the governor has billions of dollars sitting around, he actually has the authority to unilaterally spend it however he wants.
Well, didn't that come with a caveat in that didn't he say that in the tax committee or somebody that of the $2 billion that are coming in that aren't spent yet, he'll let the legislature figure out 1.5, but he'll keep $500 million for himself to give away. Is that not a law? That's just a firm handshake. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah, it's a firm handshake. It's the back of the napkin agreement between Senate Majority Leader Gazelka and the governor. So the governor gets to spend $500 million how he wants. And that's, again, it's federal money, but it's still taxpayer money.
Yeah, no, how does that work? Monday, the only reason you guys are getting together Monday is because of his executive powers, executive order thing. He gave it to himself again for another 30 days. Thoroughly presume he's going to do it for another 30 days. Thoroughly presume you're all going to show up. Thoroughly presume the House is going to say, yeah, and the Senate's going to say no, and he gets to keep his powers. Is anything changing in our lives? Because I think this is the 14th time you guys have done that.
Yeah, nothing's going to change on the emergency powers thing. I mean, my guess, I'm gonna still vote to end the emergency, but I'm in the minority in the House, so the House will maintain his power. And my hope is that we negotiate an actual change to the underlying emergency powers law during the end of session. We can't just negotiate an end of the emergency because the next day he could reissue that emergency.
Well, no, that law has to be changed. I think both sides can see there's got to be some other way of doing this, but that's not going to happen why he's got the power or why we're in this. But what I don't get, and maybe you can tell me on a political sense, what's it going to take? The number of people getting it that we're finding is dropping off like a cliff. The number of people who are actually passing from this, and it's terrible to lose anybody, but that's falling down. I think we had 2 or 3 the other day. The numbers are not proving anymore that there's a pandemic going on. Sometime they're going to change the word from pandemic anymore. How do you still have emergency powers? Because of the billions of dollars will come if he keeps saying he has emergency powers?
Well, there is actually I don't want to give him an excuse here, but dealing with the eviction moratorium, which was self-inflicted by the government, that we need to do something about the eviction moratorium and some kind of off-ramp, or just rip the Band-Aid off and understand that there will be people displaced, and we just have to deal with that.
One last thing before we go, it was on your Facebook page. You made comment to the fact that the St. Paul Minneapolis School District decided that they were going to end school because it's just too darn hot. is it just a matter we don't want to be in schools? So we go through a pandemic. Kids can learn all year long, sitting in their own houses with a computer. St. Paul Public Schools, nah, it's too hot for that. Are we even trying to teach the kids anymore? What are we teaching them other than just give up? Yeah, it's hot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really disappointing. And, I'm told that the decision came from the teachers union, that they just were burned out and didn't want to deal with it anymore. And so they just decided to end the school year and just call it quits.
But maybe I'm missing something, and I presume it's because of the teachers union. But don't we have like contracts with every teacher saying you're going to have 172 days in front of kids, and we muck that around because of COVID and could be into the computer. But can you just say the school's off? It's too hot.
No, normally you cannot. It's Minnesota state law of how many days that you have to teach. But because of COVID, that was suspended for this year. So presumably they can just be done and close shop, go home and let our kids suffer.
Well, and the kids, you bet, why not? But they're not looking at the fact that how much have we lost in the education of our young children, and some won't have time to make up. Second graders might be able to make it up in the next 20 years, but you know what? 18, you're going off to college. How many days did you not get in there? And then let's just kick the last week out. I'm sorry, we're mucking with our kids here, and no one seems to care.
Yeah, there's several meetings around the state put on by an outside group that are trying to educate people about school policy and how to get involved and how to get involved in your local school boards and to make a difference, because I think people are waking up to whether it's critical race theory or anything else that's going on in schools, rewriting the lectures and stuff. People need to get involved with school policy.
Appreciate it, Representative Munson. We're completely out of time, but I always love having you on the program. We'll get you back next week once everything's all wrapped up. You can give us a big session wrap up. How about that?
All right, Al. That sounds great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Representative Munson on Al in the Afternoon.